The lie left her stepbrother's mouth the way he did everything, smoothly, with a smile, as though he were doing the whole ballroom a kindness. Eleanor Merrow heard it from 6 feet away, over the sawing of the violins and the hiss of 100 silk hems across the chalked floor, and she felt it land on her skin like a spark off a candle. "Poor creature," Crispin Vane said, loud enough. "One tries to be charitable. But a girl who slips out to the mews at Lady Harbour's and comes back with straw on her hem and a stranger's ring on her finger. Well, my father took her in out of pity. We none of us imagined she'd repay it by making herself so very available." The knot of gentlemen around him laughed, not because it was funny, because he was handsome and rich by association, and the laughter was cheaper than crossing him. Eleanor did not move. She had learned, in 3 years under Sir Roland Vane's roof, that stillness was the only weapon they could not take from her. Her fan hung closed against her wrist. The heat of the July evening pressed down through the open windows, thick with the green smell of the gardens outside and the melting wax of 500 candles, and beneath it she caught the particular note of Crispin's cologne, bergamot and something sweeter, cloying, the scent of a man who wished to be noticed before he was seen. "There is no ring," she said. Her voice carried further than she intended. The nearest violins had paused between figures, and the words dropped into that hollow like a coin into a well. Crispin turned. He was beautiful. She would give him that. Had always given him that. The way one gives a viper credit for the elegance of its markings. Gold hair, a jaw a sculptor might have quarrelled over, eyes the pale blue of a winter Eleanor could not feel in this heat. He looked at her hand, bare, gloved in white kid to the elbow, not a jewel on it, and his smile did not falter for so much as a breath. "Now she denies it," he said to the room, delighted. "You see how it is done." "I deny it, because it did not happen." She stepped forward. The crowd, sensing blood without yet smelling it, opened a path for her, and she took it. "Say the name of the gentleman, Crispin, since you know him so well. Since you saw the ring. Give the room his name, and let him answer for the straw on my hem." A muscle moved at the corner of his jaw. He had not expected her to walk toward him. He had expected her to redden and flee, as she had learned to flee at Vane House when he cornered her on the stairs and called her Charity, called her the cuckoo his father had let into the nest, called her, when Sir Roland was safely at his club, far worse. "You will make a scene," he murmured, only for her now, the smile a mask nailed to the front of his face. "You made the scene," she said. "I am merely finishing it." For one moment, she thought she had him. The gentleman shifted. Somewhere behind her a dowager's voice said, quite clearly, "Well, and what is the young man's name, if he saw so much?" And the question travelled the room like a draught under a door. Then Crispin recovered. Because men like Crispin always recover, the world has been arranged for their recovery since the cradle. "My dear sister," he said, the endearment a blade laid flat against her throat. "I shall not name him, precisely because I am a gentleman. Your reputation is already in tatters. I would not have his ruined too." And he bowed to her, mockingly, from the waist, and the laughter came again, and Eleanor understood, with the cold clarity that had kept her upright through 3 years of this house, that she had lost. Not the argument. The argument she had won. She had lost the thing the argument was about, which was whether she might walk into any drawing room in London next week and be received. By tomorrow noon the story would be at 40 breakfast tables, and by tomorrow evening it would have a ring in it, and straw, and a stranger, and no name at all to hang it on, which made it perfect, which made it unkillable. Because a lie with no name cannot be met in the field, and cannot be sued, and cannot be made to apologize. She was aware of her own heartbeat, high and fast in her throat. She was aware of the wax and the crushed roses and the sweat of the dancers, and, faintly, from the supper room, the smell of iced champagne and lobster patties going warm. She was aware that her stepfather, Sir Roland, stood not 20 feet distant, with his back half-turned, having heard every word, and had chosen the study of a landscape painting over the defense of his ward. She was aware, above all, that she must not weep. Weeping would be the ring. Weeping would be the straw. So she inclined her head to Crispin, the smallest possible degree, a courtesy that was also a promise, and she said, in a voice pitched for him alone, "You should not have done this here. And where should I have done it?" His eyes glittered. "Somewhere you might have hidden it?" "No, sweet sister. I rather thought the world should know what my father sleeps under his own roof." Then a voice she did not know cut across the space between them, low, unhurried, and cold, in a way that had nothing of the July night in it. "I know the gentleman's name." The room turned as one body. Eleanor turned with it. He stood at the edge of the cleared floor, with the ease of a man who had never in his life had to ask permission to enter a room. Tall. Taller than Crispin, broader through the shoulder. His black evening coat cut close enough that the width of him strained faintly at the seam when he moved. Dark hair, unfashionably plain. No pomade, a face that was not soft anywhere, a straight hard mouth, a nose that had perhaps once been broken. Grey eyes set deep and fixed, at this moment, upon her stepbrother, with the particular attention a man gives a thing he has decided to remove. She knew him by sight, as everyone knew him by sight. The Duke of Ashmore. 6 months returned from his estates in the north, spoken of at every table she had been permitted to sit at. The young Duke, they said. The one who did not dance. The one who had buried his father some years past, and now held one of the oldest titles in England at 27. She had never spoken a word to him. She was entirely certain he did not know she existed. "Your Grace," Crispin said, and to his credit, Eleanor granted him this too. He did not flinch. "You have the advantage of me. I was not aware the lady's affairs were of any interest to a man of your—" "The gentleman's name," the Duke said, "is Ashmore." Silence. Real silence now. The violins gone. The fans stopped. The whole hot, glittering room hung on its own held breath. "I beg your pardon," said Crispin. "You spoke of a gentleman at Lady Harborough's ball. A ring. A meeting in the mews." The Duke came forward. He did not hurry. He walked as though the floor had been laid for the express purpose of his crossing it, and the crowd fell back before him the way it had fallen back for Eleanor, only faster, and with fear in it. "I was at Lady Harborough's ball. I met Miss Merrow in the garden, not the mews, for the space of 4 minutes, in the full view of Lady Harborough's under-gardener and 2 footmen, when I mistook her for my cousin and begged her pardon for it. There was no ring. There was no straw. There was a great deal of moonlight and a very cold civility, which I have thought about, I confess, rather more often than the occasion warranted." Eleanor's breath stopped in her chest. It was not true. She had never met the Duke of Ashmore in any garden. She had never met him anywhere. She had spent Lady Harborough's ball in the card-room fetching negus for Sir Rowland's gouty friends, because that was what a charity ward was permitted to do at a ball. And this man, this stranger, was building a lie of his own, board by board, in front of 200 witnesses, and setting her inside it like a woman being walled into safety. So, the Duke went on, and now he stopped, directly before Crispin, close enough that Crispin had to tip his golden head back to hold his eyes. "You have 3 courses before you, Mist. Vane. You may repeat, to my face, that the lady met a stranger in the mews, in which case you name me the stranger, and you name me a liar, and we shall have done with the pretence that this is about her at all. Your Grace. You may confess, here, now, that you invented the whole of it out of some private spite I do not care to understand." The candlelight ran along the hard line of his jaw. "Or you may say nothing, which every soul in this room will read as the 3rd confession, and the truest." Crispin's tongue passed once across his lower lip. Eleanor watched him calculate, watched the beautiful machinery behind his eyes turn over the sums. The Duke's rank, the Duke's shoulders, the 200 watching faces, the impossibility of retreat without ruin. He chose wrong. She could have told him he would. She had lived with him for 3 years, and she knew that the one thing Crispin Vane could not survive was to be made small in a crowd. "I say," Crispin said, lifting his chin, pitching it for the room, "that a duke may build whatever garden he pleases around a girl who has none of her own. I say your grace is very gallant, and I wonder what the gallantry costs her. And I say," his mouth curled, "that I stand by every word, and if you dislike it, that is your affair and not mine." Something changed in the duke's face. It did not grow angrier. It grew quieter, which Eleanor would learn, in the days to come, was the far more dangerous thing. "Then it is my affair," he said. He drew off his right glove, slowly, finger by finger, the white kid peeling from a large scarred hand, and he did not throw it at Crispin's feet, which would have been theatre. He set it, with great care, against Crispin's chest, flat over the heart, and let it fall. "Name your friends," the Duke of Ashmore said. "You will meet me at dawn." Eleanor heard a woman gasp. She heard her own pulse. She heard, absurdly, the small, wet sound of ice shifting in a pail somewhere in the supper room. And she thought, with the part of her mind that had never once in her life been permitted to stop calculating, "This is worse. This is so much worse than the lie." For a lie, she could not stop. But a man could be stopped. A dawn could be prevented. And now, because a stranger had chosen to build her a garden she had never walked in, she was bound to 2 men where before she had been troubled by one, and one of them stood ready to face pistols on a wet field over 4 minutes of moonlight that had never happened. Crispin had gone the color of tallow. Whatever he had expected, it had not been this. The young duke was supposed to be an eccentric, a rustic, a title with no teeth. You cannot be in earnest," he managed. Over her? "Dawn," the Duke said. "Chalk Farm. I trust your friends can find it." He turned. And for the first time since he had spoken, his grey eyes came to rest on Eleanor's face. Not long, not soft. A glance no longer than the drawing off of a glove. And there was something in it she could not read at all. Not tenderness, not triumph, but a kind of grim, weary recognition, as though he had seen her somewhere she had never been, and remembered it. Then he inclined his head, murmured, "Miss Merrow," as though they had been introduced, and walked out of the ballroom through a crowd that could not open fast enough to be rid of him. The instant the great doors closed behind him, the room exhaled into chaos. The violins did not resume. Nobody wished to dance. There was only the roar of 200 voices all beginning at once, and above them, sailing clear, the dowagers already at their work. Over her, my dear, the young duke, at dawn. Well, I always said the vain girl would be trouble. No. The other one, the stepbrother. No. A hand closed hard on Eleanor's upper arm. Outside, Sir Roland said into her ear. Now, he steered her, not gently, through a side door, along a passage that smelled of cold plaster and dust and the tallow of the servants' candles instead of the drawing-room's honeyed beeswax, and out onto a small stone terrace above the gardens. The July night met her like a warm, wet cloth. Somewhere below, in the dark, water moved in a fountain. The air was thick with stocks and jasmine and the deep green rot of a summer border after rain, and she filled her lungs with it, because she had not, she realized, breathed properly since Crispin opened his mouth. Sir Roland released her arm and rounded on her. He was a big man run to softness, her stepfather, handsome once and still handsome in the jaw, with Crispin's colouring gone silver, and Crispin's charm gone entirely to gout and grievance. "What," he said, "have you done?" "I?" The word came out of her flat and cold. "Sir, I stood in a ballroom while your son told 200 people I had sold myself in a stable. I did nothing but breathe." "You answered him." You walked at him across the floor like a fishwife. I asked him to name the man. Her hands had begun, faintly, to shake, and she pressed them flat to her skirts so he would not see. That is all I did. And he could not, because there was no man. Because it was a lie he made this morning over his chocolate, for no reason but that I refused to be frightened of him any longer. And now a duke, Sir Roland said, one of the first men in the kingdom. A man I cannot afford to have as my enemy, for 100 reasons you are too young and too foolish to comprehend, is to face my son with pistols at first light, and when it goes wrong, when one of them is carried off that field, do you imagine any door in London opens to this family again? Do you imagine mine does? I have daughters of my own, Eleanor. Real daughters. I have Crispin's sisters to marry. And you. He stopped. But she heard the shape of the sentence he had swallowed, and she finished it for him, quietly, because there was a bit of freedom in saying it aloud where he would not. And I am not real. Yes, I know it. You have never let me forget it. For a moment something moved in his heavy face that might, in a better man, have been shame. Then it closed over. You will fix this, he said. How? I do not care how. He took a step back toward the door, and the drawing room light fell across half of him, gilding one side, leaving the other in the garden dark. You will go to the Duke of Ashmore tonight. Write him. Send to him. Throw yourself on the carriage step, I do not care. And you will tell him the truth. That there was no garden. No 4 minutes. Nothing. That he has been made a fool of by a stepbrother's spite and a foundling's temper, and there is nothing here worth a great man's powder. You will unmake his interest in you, Eleanor, whatever it is and however it began, and you will do it before dawn, or so help me. You will not sleep another night under my roof. The threat should have frightened her. She waited to be frightened. Instead she found, standing on that warm, dark terrace with the fountain whispering below and her whole ruined future spread out plain before her, that she was thinking of the Duke's face at the moment he had looked at her, that grim, weary recognition, and of the extraordinary, unaccountable thing he had done, which was to lie for a woman he had never met, and stake his life on the lie, and walk out without waiting for her thanks. He did not do it for me, she said, half to herself. He does not know me. Why would a man I neither know nor care, snapped Sir Roland. Ask him yourself, since you are so bent on speaking to men above your station. Only see it stopped. He wrenched the door open. The noise of the ballroom rushed out and broke over them both. Before dawn, girl, or you are nothing, and you have no one, and you will learn precisely what that means in a city like this one. The door closed. She was alone on the terrace with the jasmine and the fountain and the great indifferent wheel of the London night turning over her head. Eleanor stood very still and let herself, for exactly the length of 10 heartbeats, feel all of it, the humiliation, still hot on her face, the fear, cold and low in her belly, not for herself but for a stranger who by first light might be lying on wet grass at Chalk Farm, and beneath both, unexpected and unwelcome and impossible to argue away. A thin, bright thread of something that was almost, the first happiness she had felt in 3 years. Someone had stood up. In a room built entirely to make her small, one enormous silent stranger had walked to the center of the floor and refused, on her behalf, to let the small thing stand. She could not let him face those pistols for it. She counted to 10. Then she straightened her spine, drew her wrap from where it had slipped to her elbows, and went back inside. Not to Sir Roland, not to the whispering crowd, but along the servants' passage, down the back stair with its smell of tallow and boot-black and cold stone, and out through the mews door into the July dark, where the carriages waited in a long patient rank, and the link boys dozed against the wall, and the whole warm night smelled of horse and straw and coming rain. She would find where the Duke of Ashmore lodged in town. She would go to him tonight, uninvited, unchaperoned, Precisely the reckless, improper thing that Crispin had accused her of, and she had never once done. And she would tell him, plainly, to his hard grey face, that whatever he thought he had seen in a garden at Lady Harborough's, he was mistaken, that she was not worth the dawn, that he must send word to Chalk Farm and let it fall. She got as far as the first row of carriages before a groom stepped out of the dark and touched his hat. "Miss Merrow?" She stopped. Her heart knocked once. Hard, who asks? His Grace, Miss, the man's face was invisible under the brim, but his voice was country plain, and not unkind. "The Duke of Ashmore," he said, "begging your pardon." These were his words. He said you'd not stay in that house an hour, and I was to wait at the mews with the carriage until you came out, however long, and bring you where you wished to go. And he said to tell you one thing more if you argued. She heard a horse shift and blow in the traces. He said, "It is not about you, but you may make it so, if you will come and hear him out." The rain that had threatened all evening began, at that moment, to fall, warm, fat summer drops, ticking into the straw and the dust of the mews, releasing all at once the whole green-drowned smell of the London gardens, and Eleanor Merrow stood bareheaded in it, and understood that the door behind her had already closed, that whatever she chose now she could not go back through the ballroom and become again the quiet charity ward fetching negus for gouty men, that a stranger with a broken nose and a dead man's title had unmade her old life, with the drawing off of a single glove. "Then take me to him," she said, and gathered her wet skirts, and climbed into the dark of the carriage. The carriage smelled of leather and cold pipe smoke, and, faintly, of the beeswax someone had rubbed into the seams of the seats. And Eleanor sat with her wet skirts gathered in both fists, and watched the link boys' lanterns slide backward across the glass. The rain came harder now. It drummed on the roof in a steady country rhythm, so unlike the sharp city clatter she knew, and beneath it the wheels found the wet cobbles and turned them into a long hushing sound that filled the dark box like water filling a jug. She had done a reckless thing. She catalogued it coldly, the way she catalogued everything: the improper hour, the absent chaperone, the stranger's carriage, the fact that Sir Roland, if he learned of it, would name it proof of every word Crispin had said, and yet the alternative had been the terrace, and the closed door, and the slow settling of the lie over her like silt over a drowned thing. She would rather be reckless than buried. The groom drove them not west toward the great squares where she had expected a duke to lodge, but east and then south, until the streets narrowed and the good lamps thinned, and the smell that came in at the window seams changed from wet gardens to wet stone, coal smoke, the river's green breath. She leaned to the glass. "This is not Mayfair," she said aloud, to no one. The carriage slowed before a house that had been grand once, and was grand still in a plain, unfashionable way. Square, dark-bricked, its windows tall and mostly unlit. A single lamp burning under the portico, and throwing a wet gold coin of light onto the streaming steps. No knocker wrapped in crepe, no crowd of waiting servants, only the one lamp, and the rain, and a door that opened before the wheels had wholly stopped, as though someone within had been standing at it a long while. He came out himself, not a footman, him, the Duke, still in his black evening coat but without the glove now, bareheaded in the rain, coming down the wet steps two at a time to hand her down as though she were a duchess and not a foundling in a soaked gown. His grip closed round her gloved fingers, warm and hard, and let go the instant her feet found the stone. "You came," he said. "Good. Come in out of it. You'll take a chill, and then I shall be accused of that too." The observation was so dry, so unexpectedly light against the black weight of the evening, that a startled sound escaped her that was very nearly a laugh, and she saw him mark it, saw the corner of that hard mouth move a fraction, before he stood aside to let her pass into the hall. Inside, the house was warmer than she had braced for, and barer than she had imagined any duke's house could be. Holland covers still ghosted half the furniture. There were pale squares on the walls where paintings had hung and been taken down. A single branch of candles burned on a side table, and by their light she saw a hall meant for splendor and stripped nearly to the boards. And she understood, without being told, that this was a man who had come south to a house he did not love and had not troubled to pretend otherwise. "You are staring," he said, not unkindly, taking her sodden wrap from her shoulders himself when no servant appeared to do it. "Everyone does. My father let the place go to sleep, and I have not had the heart, or the money, to wake it. Through here, there is a fire." The room he brought her to had been a library, and was one still, though half the shelves stood empty. A fire burned low and red in a marble grate, too fine for it. 2 chairs. A desk with a branch of candles and a scatter of papers, weighted down by a plain brass inkstand, and beside them she saw it, and her breath caught. A wooden case, long and flat and unmistakable, its lid open. 2 pistols nested in green baize like sleeping things. He followed her eyes. He did not close the case. "Sit," he said. "You are frightened of those. You needn't be. Not of the objects. It is the men who trouble me. Your Grace." She did not sit. She stood on the hearthrug with the fire warming the back of her wet skirts and her hands cold at her sides, and she said the thing she had come across half of London to say, plainly, before her courage could fail. "You must not do this." He crossed to the desk and stood with one scarred hand resting on the open lid of the case, looking down at the pistols rather than at her. In the candlelight, the broken line of his nose threw a small shadow across his cheek. "Must I not?" he said. There was no garden. The words came fast now, tumbling. There were no 4 minutes. "I have never in my life spoken to you before this night. You know it. You invented every word of it in that ballroom, and I do not understand why. But I will not have a man face pistols at dawn for a moment of moonlight that never happened. It is a lie." "It is a lie," he agreed. "It is a better lie than his. That is all. Sit down, Miss Merrow. You are swaying, and I have no wish to explain to my housekeeper in the morning why a young lady fainted on my hearth. She already disapproves of me thoroughly. I would not add fuel. I am not going to faint." "No," he said, considering her with those deep grey eyes. "I don't suppose you are. You did not faint in the ballroom, and that was a harder thing. Sit. All the same. I find I cannot argue with someone who is standing at me like a drawn sword. It puts me at a disadvantage, and I am told I have few enough of those to spare." She sat. It was easier to be brave standing, but her knees had begun to betray her, and there was, she found, an unbearable relief in the simple heat of the fire and the deep old chair, and the fact that for the first time in 3 hours, no one in the room wished her ill. He drew the other chair round to face her, not too close, and sat with his forearms on his knees, and for a moment neither of them spoke. The fire ticked. The rain ran down the tall black windows. Somewhere deep in the sleeping house, a clock counted the quarter and fell silent. "You asked my groom why," he said at last. "He told me you would. It is not about you, Miss Merrow. I said as much, and it was not gallantry. It was the truth, and you deserve the truth more than most, because you have had so little of it thrown your way tonight. Shall I give it to you? I wish you would." He looked into the fire. When he spoke, his voice had gone lower, rougher, the cold court manner peeling back from something older underneath. 4 years ago, I had a friend. The nearest thing to a brother I ever owned. We were at school together, and then in the north together, and he was worth 10 of me, and knew nothing of it, which is the way with the best of them. A muscle moved in his jaw. Your stepbrother ruined him. Not with a pistol. With his mouth, the very thing you watched him do to you tonight. The smiling word in the crowded room. The story with no name to hang it on. He said a thing about my friend at a card table in a house I will not name, a thing that could not be met and could not be disproved. And he said it charmingly, and everyone laughed, because he is handsome, and it was cheaper than crossing him. He turned his head and looked at her directly. You know the laugh. I saw you know it. I know the laugh, she said quietly. My friend left England. There was nothing else he could do. The door had been shut in his face at 40 houses by a story that grew a ring and a stranger and a straw or their like every time it was told. His hand had closed, she saw, into a fist upon his knee, and he seemed to notice it and open it deliberately, finger by finger, the same slow control with which he had drawn off the glove. I was in the north burying my father when it happened. By the time word reached me, it was 3 weeks old, and my friend was on a ship. I have not forgiven myself the 3 weeks. I have certainly not forgiven Crispin Vane. The fire settled. A coal broke and sent up a brief, soft rush of sparks, and in their light Eleanor understood at last the thing she had read in his face across the ballroom, the grim, weary recognition. The look of a man seeing something he had seen before in a place she had never been. So you were not defending me at all, she said. You saw him do to me what he had done to your friend. And I saw him do it, the Duke said, and I found I could not stand in one more room and let the small thing stand. That is the whole of it. I am not a good man, Miss Merrow, whatever the ballroom will say of me by morning. I did not step forward for your sake. I stepped forward because I have been waiting 4 years for Crispin Vane to say his charming word where I might hear it. And tonight, at last, he obliged me. She should, she thought, have been wounded by it. He had made her a pretext, had built her a garden not to shelter her, but to bait a trap, and she had ridden across London imagining herself the reason, and finding herself the instrument. She waited to feel used. Instead, she felt, absurdly, a kind of steadying kinship, because at least this was honest, and honesty had been in such short supply under Sir Rowland's roof that she had half forgotten its taste. Then, we want the same thing, she said, and different things, both at once. You want to make Crispin answer. I want to prevent a mourning that ruins everyone, your friend's memory included, for if you are carried off that field, the story becomes that a duke faced pistols over a foundling in a stable, and Crispin has won a second time, and won larger. She leaned forward. You cannot beat a lie by staking your life on a lie of your own. If you meet him at Chalk Farm, you prove nothing except that he was worth meeting. And if the worst should happen to you there, sir, it is not you who pays. It is the next friend, the next girl in the next ballroom. There is always a next. He was silent a long moment. She could not read him at all. The hard face gave nothing, only the grey eyes moving over her face as though she were a page in an unfamiliar hand he was learning to decipher. You argue, he said slowly, rather better than most of the men who have tried to talk me out of things. I have had more practice at being disbelieved. It sharpens the tongue. Evidently, he rose, restless now, and went to the window, and stood with his back to her looking out at the streaming dark. You would have me withdraw. Send my friends to his friends before first light, with word that the Duke of Ashmore repents his temper and begs the affair be considered closed. Yes, and you know what that makes me. She did know. She hated that she knew. A coward, she said, in the telling. By tomorrow noon it is that the young Duke blustered at a ball and crept away by dawn, and Crispin has beaten a duke. And there is no man in London he cannot say his charming word about now, because he faced the first title in the kingdom, and the title blinked. She pressed her cold hands together. I know what I am asking you to swallow. I am asking you to let him win the field so that he cannot win the war. It is a bitter thing. I have swallowed bitterer, and I am still here. He turned from the window. Something had shifted in the set of his shoulders. Not agreement. Not yet, but the loosening of a man who has met, unexpectedly, another mind at work where he had thought to find only a person to be managed. There is a third road, he said, between his lie and mine, between the field and the flight. Then take it, whatever it is. I do not yet know what it is. A ghost of that dry note returned to his voice. I had rather hoped, when you climbed so bravely into my carriage, that you had brought it with you. You seemed the sort of woman who arrives with a plan sewn into her hem. I brought only the truth, and a great deal of rain, she said, and you have had both now. So the door opened without a knock. Not a servant. Eleanor knew the tread before she saw the face, knew the bergamot and the sweeter cloying note beneath it that reached her a half-second before the man, and she was on her feet with her heart slamming against her stays before Crispin Vane had cleared the threshold. He was still in his ball dress, gold hair darkened at the temples with rain, and he had brought another man with him, older, hard-faced. A stranger in a plain coat who hung back by the door with the watchful stillness of a hired thing. Crispin's eyes went from the Duke to Eleanor to the open pistol case on the desk, and his beautiful mouth curved into the smile she hated most, the one that meant he believed he had found a weapon. Well, he said, here is a scene worth the ride. My sister, unchaperoned, in a bachelor duke's library, past midnight, still damp from his carriage. I confess, Ashmore, I did not think you'd hand me the proof of my own story so very kindly. And to think I came to prevent bloodshed. You came, the Duke said, and all the roughness had gone out of his voice, and the cold court manner had closed over it like ice over a black pool, because your father sent you. And your father sent you because he has understood, rather faster than you have. That dawn does not suit him. You may put the smile away, Mr. Vane. It does not work in this house. There is no crowd here to laugh. Crispin's gaze slid to Eleanor. Come away from him, he said. And there was something under the silk of it now, something she had heard on the stairs at Vane House with Sir Roland safely at his club, low and ugly, and meant for her alone. You little fool. Do you imagine he wants you? He wants me on a field at Chalk Farm, and you are the stick he beats me with, and when he has done, he will set you down in the road exactly where he found you, except worse, because now you are the girl who spent a night in his house. I have been telling the truth about you all evening. You have spent the whole of it making the truth for me. Come away, and I may yet be able to mend it. Eleanor felt the old pull of it, 3 years of it, the instinct to grow small, to lower her eyes, to make herself no target. She felt her spine begin its habitual bow. Then she felt the fire at her back, and the memory of the man who had walked to the center of a ballroom for a reason that was not her, and had told her so to her face, and she found she was done, wholly and finally done, with growing small. No, she said. The word dropped into the room like the coin into the well. No, she said again, and her voice did not shake, and she watched the surprise of it move across her stepbrother's face. I will not come away, Crispin. I have come away from every room you have wished me out of for 3 years, and it has brought me nothing but the next room, and the next. You made your story tonight in front of 200 people. Now, I am making mine. I am going to stand in this library, and I am going to help this gentleman find a way to make you answer for 4 years of your charming words, his friends, and mine, and whoever came before us, that we do not even know to grieve. And there is nothing you can say about my hymn, or my straw, or my night in a strange house that frightens me any longer, because I have finally understood the thing you counted on me never understanding. She drew a breath. You have no power over a woman who has already lost her reputation. You spent it for me tonight. I am free of it. And a free woman is the one thing in the world you have never known how to fight. The silence after was absolute. Crispin's face had gone through several countries. Surprise, fury, and then, chillingly, back to composure. The smile reassembling itself piece by beautiful piece. But she had seen the crack. She had seen, for 1/2 second, the boy behind the viper, and the boy had been afraid. Very pretty, he said. You always did have a gift for the grand speech, when there was no one of consequence to hear it. But you have forgotten one thing, sister. He glanced at the hard-faced man by the door, and the man straightened. My father has not disowned you yet. Until he does, You are a Vane in the world's eyes, and a Vane's ruin is the family's ruin, and there are debts on Vane House that a scandal calls in overnight. You think you have nothing left to lose. You are wrong. You have us. You have my sisters, who are innocent, and who will not marry a farthing above a curate if their charity cousin is the talk of London by Sunday. So, the smile widened. You will come home. Tonight, or I shall go to every one of the 40 breakfast tables myself at 9 tomorrow, and swear on my mother's grave that I found you in the Duke of Ashmore's arms at midnight. And this time, cousin, it will be true enough that even your grand speeches cannot unmake it. Eleanor's certainty wavered. Not for herself, he was right that she had nothing, but the sisters. Prudence and Amabel, 16 and 17, who had never once been cruel to her, who had smuggled her cake up the back stairs on the nights she was sent supperless, who would drown in Crispin's flood without ever knowing they had been thrown in. The Duke moved. He did not raise his voice. He crossed the room to the desk, unhurried, and he did not touch the pistols. Instead, he took up a single sheet of paper and the plain brass inkstand, and he set them at the desk's edge, and he looked at Crispin over the candle flame with something that was almost gentle, and was not gentle at all. "Sit down, Mr. Vane," he said, "and write to your father. I beg you will write to Sir Rowland," the Duke went on, "that the affair of the ball is settled between us as gentlemen, that there will be no dawn, and that Miss Merrow spent the last 2 hours under the chaperonage of my late mother's cousin, Lady Sefton, who is asleep upstairs, and will confirm every word of it in the morning, because she owes me a debt older than your family's arrogance." His grey eyes did not blink. "There is no such cousin awake in this house tonight. There will be, by 9. That is what a duke's word can buy that yours cannot, Mr. Vane, and it is why you have already lost, and why you came here smiling instead of shooting. You did the sum in the carriage. You know your father cannot afford my enmity. Write the letter, and the story dies before breakfast, yours and mine both. Refuse, and I keep the dawn, and I promise you before this lady and your own hired witness that I do not intend to be the one carried off that field." Crispin did not move toward the desk. "You would forge a chaperone," he said slowly, "for her. A foundling. You would spend Lady Sefton's name and your own honor to make a strange girl respectable. For a friend's revenge?" His head tilted, and the calculation in his eyes turned to something colder, sharper, genuinely puzzled. No. There is more here than a dead friendship. What is she to you, Ashmore? You knew her name in the ballroom before any introduction. You had a carriage waiting at the mews before she chose to run. You knew she would run. He looked between them, and Eleanor saw the thought arrive in him, and dreaded it before he spoke it. "You have met her before. Not in a garden. Somewhere, haven't you?" Eleanor turned to the Duke, and the Duke, for the first time that whole long night, did not answer at once. The fire ticked. The rain ran. And in the half-second before he found his cold composure again, Eleanor saw it cross his face. Brief, involuntary, gone almost before it came. The same grim, weary recognition she had seen in the ballroom. The look of a man who had known her somewhere she had never been. "Write the letter," the Duke said, too evenly, "or leave my house." But it was too late. Crispin had seen it too. His slow smile came back, and this time it was the true one, the one that had no fear in it at all. "Oh," he breathed, "there it is. There is the thing you'd rather I hadn't found." He drew on his gloves, finger by finger, a hateful mockery of the gesture Eleanor had watched the Duke make 3 hours before. "I shall write no letters tonight, Your Grace. I find the dawn suits me very well after all, now that I know there is a secret in it worth uncovering. I wonder how it will sound at those 40 breakfast tables. That the Duke of Ashmore knew the Vane foundling before she came to Vane House, that he has known her all along, and told no one, and lied a garden into being to cover it." He bowed to the Duke, to Eleanor, from the waist, exactly as he had bowed in the ballroom, until Chalk Farm then, Both of you. Sleep well." The door closed behind him and the hired man, and the two of them were left in the ticking firelit dark. And Eleanor rounded on the Duke of Ashmore, with her heart going like a hammer and a cold understanding opening in her chest like a trapdoor. "He is right," she said. "You did know my name. You knew I would run. What did he mean, that you have met me before? Your Grace, what garden was real?" And the Duke of Ashmore looked at her across the guttering candles, and the words he found were not an answer. "Not tonight," he said. "Ask me at Chalk Farm, if we both live to see the road home. There are things I have kept 4 years that I cannot give you standing up, and cannot give you at all until I know whether tomorrow makes a liar of us both." Eleanor did not sit again. The fire had burned to a low red seam behind her, and the heat of it pressed at the backs of her knees through the damp muslin. But the cold had got into her from another direction entirely, and no grate in England would reach it. "That is not an answer," she said. "That is a door shut in my face with a kind word painted on it. I have had a great many of those tonight, Your Grace. I did not come across half of London to be given one more." The Duke stood at the desk with his scarred hand flat on the open lid of the pistol case, and he did not lift his eyes to her. The single branch of candles had burned down a full inch since she came in. The wax ran in a slow, pale tongue over the silver and gathered at the foot of the stick, and the whole room smelled of it now. Hot tallow and cold rain, and the faint iron of the fire. "You are cold," he said. "Let me ring for. You will not ring for anything." Her voice came out low and steady, and it surprised her, how steady. "You will tell me what my stepbrother saw in your face. You saw it too. I watched you fail to hide it, and you have never once tonight failed to hide anything you did not choose to show. What garden was real, Ashmore? You knew my name. You knew I would run. A man does not stake his life at dawn on a stranger. So I am not a stranger. Tell me what I am." The rain answered first, a long soft hiss down the tall black windows. Somewhere far off in the sleeping house, a board settled with a sound like a held breath let go. "Sit down," he said, "and I will stand. You will fall." He looked up at last, and there was no cold court manner left in it. There was only the grey weariness she had first seen across the ballroom. The look of a man setting down a weight he had carried so long, the shape of it had grown into his hands. "You have had no supper, no sleep, and a very great deal thrown at your feet in the space of 3 hours. Sit down, Miss Merrow. Not because I command it, because what I am about to give you is heavier than you are standing, and I would rather not catch you." She sat. The old chair took her in, and she hated how her body sank toward its heat, hated the animal relief of it, and she folded her cold hands hard in her lap so that at least they would not shame her by shaking. "His name was Daniel Everett," the Duke said. "Your friend. The one Crispin, my friend." He drew the other chair round again and sat, forearms on his knees, and looked into the fire rather than at her. "The one your stepbrother ruined with his charming word." "Yes, but I did not tell you the whole of it, in the ballroom or in this room, because I did not know, until Vane stood there and read it off my face like a bill of sale, whether I had the right to tell you at all before Dawn had settled the account." He turned his head. "Daniel was your father's man, Eleanor," the fire ticked. She heard herself say, "From very far away, my father has been in his grave 10 years. I was a child. I remember a blue coat and a voice, and nothing else. I have no father's man. I have nothing of my father's at all. Sir Roland told me so the first week I came, that I arrived with a box of linen and a Bible, and not one thing more, and that it was Christian of him to take me." "Sir Roland," said the Duke, "told you a lie he has been telling for 4 years, and telling well, because a lie told to a child who has no means to check it is the safest lie a man can own." He let the words settle. "You did not arrive with nothing, Miss Merrow. You arrived with a small estate in Kent, a house called Fen Ditton, and the land about it, left to you by your father under a trust, held for you until you should come of age or marry. And the man he named to hold it, to keep it whole and keep it honest against the day it should be yours, was Daniel Everett. She did not move. She could not. The whole room seemed to have tilted very slowly, the way the deck of a boat tilts before you understand the water has moved, and not you. That is not true, she said. It is the truest thing anyone has said to you tonight, and it will cost me more to have said it than the lie about the garden ever could. He rose, restless, and went to the mantel, and stood with one hand braced on the cold marble. Daniel came to me 4 years ago in the north. He was frightened. Daniel, who was frightened of nothing, who had gone up a cliff after a lamb in a gale and laughed the whole way. He said a family called Vane had got themselves made the girl's people, cousins on the mother's side, some thin thread of blood, and had taken her into their house, and were drawing on the Kent rents as though the trust were their own purse, and that when he had gone to them with the deed and the accounts and asked by what right, the answer had come back 3 weeks later, not as a letter, but as a story. A charming story. Told at a card table, about a meeting, and a woman, and a thing that could not be met and could not be disproved. Straw, Eleanor whispered, and a stranger. And a ring. They're like. His jaw worked. It is the only weapon they own, that family, but it is a good one. It shut 40 doors to Daniel in a month, and a man with 40 doors shut cannot go before a magistrate about a trust, because who will believe the accounts of a man the whole town has agreed to laugh at? He came to me because I had rank enough to be a shield, and He stopped. The rain filled the silence. I was burying my father. I told him to wait 3 weeks. I told my brother-in-arms, my nearest thing to a brother, to wait 3 weeks while I put my own house in the ground, and by the time the 3 weeks were done he was aboard a ship at Bristol, with the deed in his coat, and no country left that would hear him. And the last thing he asked of me he asked from the dock, in a letter I have carried since. He drew a breath. He asked me to find the girl, to see her righted. He never doubted I would. That was Daniel. He went into exile, believing the best of a man who had let him go for the sake of 3 weeks. Eleanor sat with her hands knotted in her lap, and felt the ground she had stood on all her life dissolve quietly beneath her, grain by grain. 4 years, she said. You have known for 4 years that there is a house in Kent that is mine, that the roof over Prudence and Amabel's heads, the coal in Sir Rowland's grate, the very negus I have fetched for his gouty friends, all of it bought with my father's rents. And you did nothing. You let me carry the trays. I did not know where you were. He turned from the mantel. Do not look at me so until you have heard it. Daniel had a name and a county, and no more. The Vanes had moved you to town, and put you about as a charity cousin under a borrowed manor, and a girl with no name of her own in a city of 500,000 is not a thing found in a season. I looked. I have been looking 4 years. I came south in the spring. Yes, to leave my father's grave behind at last. And yes, because a duke in London can go into rooms a duke in Northumberland cannot. And I went into every one of them looking for a face I had seen once for the length of a breath and never forgotten. Once she rose now, because she could not sit under it. You saw me once. Where? And there it was again, crossing his hard face, brief and involuntary, and gone. The grim, weary recognition she had read from 6 feet away in a ballroom full of candles. In a garden, the Duke of Ashmore said. A real one. The morning before Daniel took the mail for Bristol, he asked me to walk with him past a house in Wimpole Street, where he believed the Vanes were then lodged, because he wanted, God knows why, it could do no good, to see the girl once with his own eyes before he lost the country. And we stood at the railing in the rain, 2 grown men loitering like footpads, and a young woman came out onto the step to take in a parcel from a carrier, bareheaded, in a grey gown. and she stood a moment with her face lifted to the weather as though she had not felt rain on it in a long while. And Daniel said, "That is Merrow's daughter," and then a voice called her in from the house, sharp, and she went. He was very still. I have thought of that face more often than the occasion warranted. I told you as much in the ballroom, and dressed it as gallantry, and it was not gallantry. It was the only true sentence I spoke in that whole room. I built you a false garden tonight, Miss Merrow, because I could not stand before 200 people and speak of the real one. The rain ran down the black glass. Eleanor stood on the hearthrug with her wet him cold against her ankles and could not, for a long moment, find any words at all. "You watched me take in a parcel," she said at last, and her voice had gone strange, thin. "And then you went home to Northumberland. I went home to bury my father and search 4 years for a face. You could have written to me." The words came faster now, and hotter, and she did not try to stop them. "In 4 years, Your Grace, you could have sent one line to one Vane household. There is a house in Kent that is yours. You are not a charity. You are not a cuckoo in the nest. The trays you carry are bought with your own father's corn. One line. Do you know what one line would have been worth to me? Do you know what I was, these 3 years, for want of it? I lowered my eyes when Crispin came down the stairs. I made myself small in doorways so I would not be a target. I believed them, every word. I believed I was nothing but their Christian burden, because there was no one in the whole world to tell me otherwise. And all that time you had the telling of it folded in an exile's letter in your coat, and you kept it. For your revenge. For your safety, he said sharply, and it was the first time that night he had raised his voice, and it filled the low room. Think, Eleanor. Think as well as you argue, for you argue very well. Suppose I had written your line. Suppose it reached you, or worse, reached Sir Rowland's breakfast table first, as letters to charity wards in careful houses generally do. A duke writes to the foundling that she owns Kent. What happens to the foundling? He came a step nearer. They had already ruined a grown man of standing to keep that trust. What is a girl with no friends and no name to a family who will spend a stranger's honor at a card table without blinking? You would have had an accident on the stairs. A wasting complaint. A quiet removal to a cousin's house in the country, from which no letters come. I have seen how that family solves a problem, Miss Merrow. I was not going to hand them a reason to solve you. She stared at him. The fire cracked and threw a red flare up the empty shelves. You are telling me, she said slowly, that you kept me ignorant to keep me alive. I am telling you I could not move until I could move all at once. The deed, the accounts, a magistrate who would hear me, and you, safe, somewhere they could not reach. 3 of the 4 I have had ready these 2 months. The 4th was you, and I could not find you. And then tonight, your stepbrother stood up in Lady Marchmain's ballroom and said his charming word about straw and a ring. And I looked across the floor, and there was the face from the garden, 4 years older, and standing up straight where the whole room wanted her bowed, and every plan I had made went out of my head at once. His voice dropped. I did not step forward for revenge, in the end. I told you that too, and that was the lie. I stepped forward because I had spent 4 years imagining I would find you meek and beaten, and instead I found you walking at Crispin Vane across a ballroom, asking him to name the man, and I could not. I found I could not. Stand in one more room and let the small things stand. The clock deep in the house counted the half-hour, 3 soft strokes swallowed by the rain, and Eleanor pressed the heels of her hands hard against her eyes and would not weep, because weeping would be the ring, weeping would be the straw. And she had promised herself she was done with both. Then, everything Crispin said is true, she said, dropping her hands. Not the muse, not the straw, the other thing, the true thing under it. That you knew me before. That you had a carriage waiting because you knew I would run. That there is a secret between us 4 years old, He will stand at Chalk Farm and say the Duke of Ashmore has known the vain foundling all along, and hidden it, and lied a garden into being to cover it. And he will be right, Ashmore. That is the terrible part. For once in his charming, worthless life he will be telling the truth. He will be telling a fragment of it, the Duke said, shaped to look like the whole, which is the only kind of truth he has ever told. And who will hear the difference at a breakfast table? He had no answer for that. She watched him not have one, watched the hard mouth close on it, and something in her that had been rising for the last quarter hour crested and broke. You should have left me alone. She heard the crack in her own voice and could not stop it. You should have let him say his lie tonight, and let it be only a lie, only straw, only a thing with no name that I might have outlived in a season or two in some quiet town where nobody had heard it. Instead, you have made it real. You have given the lie a true bone to grow around. You have taken the one small ruin I could have survived, and built a great one on top of it that no one survives, and you did it, her breath caught. You did it out of a promise to a man who is not here, and a face you saw once in the rain. And you never once asked the woman whose whole life you were spending whether she would have chosen to be spent. The words fell into the room and lay there. The Duke of Ashmore stood very still by the cold marble mantel, and for the first time since she had laid eyes on him he looked, not weary, but struck, as though she had reached in past all the rank and the shoulders and the 4 years of careful planning, and found the one soft place, and pressed her thumb into it. No, he said quietly. I never asked you. You are right. It is the truest thing anyone has said in this room tonight, and it was you who said it. He looked down at his scarred, open hand, as though it belonged to someone else. I have spent 4 years thinking of myself as the man who would put right what was done to Daniel, and to you, and I never once considered that writing a thing done to a person without her leave is only doing another thing to her. I am. His jaw moved. I am not accustomed to being wrong in a way I cannot mend. I find I do not care for it. Then we are matched, Eleanor said bitterly, for I am not accustomed to being righted without my leave, and I care for it less. She turned from him toward the fire, toward the guttering candles, and the long flat pistol case that had sat open on the desk this whole, while like a thing patiently waiting its turn. And she did not know, in that moment, which of them she was angrier at. The beautiful viper who had made her the stick to beat himself with. The silver-jawed man who had told her she was Christian charity while he warmed himself at her father's fire. Or this grey stranger who had loved her at a railing in the rain for 4 years and never sent the one line that would have let her stand up straight a day sooner. The knocker fell. It came up through the sleeping house from the front door. 3 heavy strokes. Unhurried, entitled, the knock of a man who has never in his life waited on a step and does not mean to begin. Eleanor felt it in the soles of her feet. The Duke lifted his head like a hound. That is not Crispin's hand, she said. Crispin knocks quickly. That is, Sir Roland, the Duke said. They looked at each other across the firelit dark, and whatever had broken open between them a moment before drew instantly closed. Because there was no time, and some understanding older than trust passed between them all the same. Whatever was about to come through that door, they would not let it see them at odds. He cannot know I am here, Eleanor said quickly, low. Crispin will have gone straight to him. He has come to drag me home before the story sets. He has come, said the Duke, moving to the desk, closing the pistol case with a soft final click, and turning the key. Because his son has told him there is a secret at Chalk Farm worth uncovering. And Sir Roland has understood, faster than Crispin ever will, that a secret about a trust is a great deal more dangerous to him than a duel. He is not here for you, Miss Merrow. He is here for the deed. He pocketed the key, which means he does not yet know that I have it. Say nothing of Kent. Say nothing of Daniel. Let him believe this is what he came expecting, an errant girl and an infatuated duke. Can you do that? Can you be, for a quarter of an hour, the small thing in the doorway one last time? She heard the servant's tread crossing the hall below, slow and reluctant. and then the bolt. "I can be anything for a quarter of an hour," Eleanor said. "I have had 3 years' practice. But you will owe me the whole of the truth after it, Ashmore. The accounts, the deed, all of it, in my own hands. And you will never again spend a day of my life without asking me first. Those are my terms. Refuse them, and I walk down those stairs this minute and tell Sir Roland everything myself, and let the pieces fall where they will." He looked at her for one held breath, and something moved behind the grey eyes that was almost, she thought, respect, or something warmer that respect wore as a coat. "Done," he said. "Every term. God help me, I think I would agree to worse." The door of the library opened, and Sir Roland Vane came in out of the wet night, with the rain still bright on the shoulders of his greatcoat and his handsome, ruined face set hard as a fist, and behind him, Eleanor's heart lurched, came not Crispin, but a small neat man in black, with a leather case under his arm, and the particular grey composure of a lawyer roused from his bed, and told the fee would be worth it. "So," Sir Roland said, and his gouty voice was very quiet, which she had learned long ago to fear far more than his shouting. "Here she is. Damp in a duke's library at 1 in the morning, exactly as my son described. You have made my work very easy, Eleanor. I had thought to have to invent this. Instead, you have gone and made it true." His pale eyes, Crispin's eyes gone silver, moved to the Duke. "Your Grace, I will not pretend at courtesies neither of us feels. I have come for my ward, and I have brought Mr. Sallow, who has been the family's man of business for 30 years, and knows where every paper in my house is kept." He let that land. Every paper, Ashmore, including some that concern this young woman, rather more nearly than she has ever been told. "I wonder," and now the quiet went quieter still, "whether you and I might speak plainly, as men who both know precisely what is at Chalk Farm, and what is not worth the powder." And Eleanor, standing small and damp on the hearthrug, with her eyes lowered, and her whole body arranged in the old bowed shape of the charity ward, felt the trap she had walked into all evening finally show her its teeth. For Sir Roland had not come to drag her home at all. He had come to make a bargain over her head, in her own hearing, as though she were the deed itself, folded and silent, and waiting to be signed away, and the only man in the room who could stop him was the one who had just sworn never again to decide her life without her leave, and who now, to save her, would have to break that oath before the ink of it was dry. Sir Roland set his dripping hat on the corner of the desk, as though the desk were already his, and Mr. Sallow drew a chair to the fire without being asked, and opened his leather case upon his knees with a small dry creak of hinges. The rain had followed them in. It darkened the shoulders of the greatcoat, and beaded on the black cloth like frost that would not melt, and the whole room took on the wet wool smell of them, sour beneath the beeswax and the hot tallow of the guttering candles. "Miss Merrow," Sir Roland said, without looking at her, "will wait in the passage while men of business speak." "Miss Merrow," said the Duke, "will remain exactly where she stands. She is my ward. She is my guest. In my library. Past 1 in the morning, by your own reckoning." The Duke had not moved from the desk. His scarred hand rested flat upon the closed lid of the pistol case, and the key to it was in his pocket, and Eleanor understood that he had put it there so that no one in the room might mistake his stillness for the reach toward a weapon. "You came to bargain, Sir Roland. A man does not send his ward from the room he means to bargain in. He keeps her by, where he can point to her. Sit down, or say your piece standing. But do not pretend at nursery rules with me. We are all 4 of us awake for the same reason." Sir Roland's ruined jaw worked once. He lowered himself into the chair opposite Sallow, and the springs took his weight with a groan, and he laced his gouty fingers over the swell of his waistcoat, and looked at the Duke through the candle smoke with the patience of a man who has decided the field is already his, and only the terms remain. "Very well." Plainly then, his voice had gone to that quiet Eleanor had learned to dread on the stairs at Vane House, the quiet that came before the worst of it. My son is a fool. I will grant your grace that freely he made a scene tonight he had not the weight to carry, and named a name, and got himself a glove against his chest for it. Boys do such things, but a duel is a public matter, and public matters have a way of turning up stones a wiser man would leave lying. I do not want the dawn, Ashmore, neither. I think do you, not truly. Not once the brandy of the ballroom has worn thin. So let us be reasonable. Let us find the thing each of us wants, and trade it, and be in our beds by 2. And what is it you imagine I want? Her gone. Sir Roland tipped his silver head toward Eleanor without turning to her. Out of your life and your library and the mouths of the ton. You have made yourself ridiculous over a foundling, and men recover from ridicule fastest when the cause of it is removed. Give her back to me. I will take her into Kent tonight, to a cousin's house where the air is quiet and the letters are few, and by Michaelmas there will be no vain girl, and no garden, and no glove, and London will have found some fresher scandal to gnaw. He spread his hands. I will even own myself in your debt for it. A duke's debt from a country baronet. There is a thing worth having. And you may keep your dawn or send it home, as suits you. Eleanor kept her eyes upon the hearthrug. She kept her hands folded, and her spine bowed in the old habitual bow, the small shape in the doorway. And she felt the trap show its whole cold length at last, for he had not come for her at all. He had come to remove her the way a man removes a witness, to bury her in a quiet county under quiet air, where no deed and no account and no dead man's letter could ever be laid beside her name. Fen Ditton. He meant to take her to her own house and make of it her grave. A cousin's house in Kent, the Duke said slowly. Which cousin? Which house? Does it signify? It might. I am fond of Kent. Mr. Sallow's pen had begun, very softly, to move. Eleanor heard it, the small wet scratch of a nib on paper, the sound of a thing being made permanent, and she lifted her eyes the barest degree, and saw that the little grey lawyer was not taking down the conversation at all. He had a document already prepared, folded once down its length, and he was filling a blank in it by the firelight, and the blank he was filling was a name. She knew then, with the cold clarity that had kept her upright for 3 years, what the paper was. A consent, a ward's removal, or worse, some instrument that a girl who had spent a night unchaperoned in a bachelor's house might be persuaded, or frightened, or shamed into signing before dawn, thinking she signed her own rescue. He had brought the trap and the paper to spring it, and the pen to make it law, and he meant to have her hand on it before she understood there had ever been a house in Kent at all. The old instinct rose in her. Lower your eyes, grow small, make yourself no target. She felt her spine begin its bow the last inch toward the floor. And then she heard, under the rain, the memory of a scarred hand peeling a white glove off finger by finger and setting it flat against a viper's heart. And she was done. "What is Mr. Sallow writing?" Eleanor said. The pen stopped. She lifted her head all the way, and she let go of the small bowed shape she had worn like a borrowed coat for 3 years, and she felt it fall from her shoulders in the firelit room, as plainly as the Duke had let the wrap fall from them an hour before. Sir Roland turned to her at last, turned the whole heavy weight of his silver-jawed face, and there was surprise in it. And under the surprise the first thin edge of alarm, because a small thing in a doorway does not ask questions of the pen. "Nothing that concerns you," he said. "Family business. It has my name in it. I saw him write it." She took one step off the hearthrug, toward the fire, toward the desk, toward the 3 men and the folded paper. "So it is precisely my business, and I will hear what it says before another word is traded over my head, as though I were the deed itself, folded and quiet, and waiting to be signed away." Her voice did not shake, and she marveled distantly that it did not. "You have both been speaking of me tonight as a thing to be removed, and a debt to be settled, and a fool's cause to be tidied away. I am none of those. I am the woman it is all about, standing in the room, with ears. Read me the paper, misty, sallow, aloud, or give it into my hand, and let me read it myself. The little lawyer looked to Sir Rowland. Sir Rowland's laced fingers had tightened until the knuckles paled. Sit down, Eleanor, he said, very soft. You are overwrought. You have had a shocking evening. No one will think the worse of you for a fit of temper at such an hour, but you will regret every word of this by daylight, and I have had 3 years of daylight in your house, sir, and regretted every one of them. She held out her hand, palm up, into the candle glow, and it did not tremble, and she watched the not trembling of it work on the room like a tide turning. The paper. Now, it was the Duke who moved. He came off the desk in one unhurried stride, and he did not take the paper from Sallow's knee, which would have been theft. He simply set himself between the lawyer and the fire, so that the light Sallow wrote by went out, and stood there with his broken-nosed face gone still and quiet, in the way Eleanor had already learned was the far more dangerous thing. You may read it to her, Mist Sallow, he said. Or I may tell her what it is, having seen 100 like it. A deed of removal, is it not, with a clause of guardianship extended past her majority on grounds of, what will you have written? Delicacy of health. Unsound conduct? A girl found damp in a duke's library makes such easy ground. His grey eyes moved to Sir Rowland. You would have her sign herself into your keeping for life tonight, while she is frightened, before she learns the one fact that would make her laugh in your face. That is a bold stroke, Vane. It is nearly a clever one. You have only made a single error, and that is? You have supposed, the Duke said, that I do not have the trust. The clock deep in the sleeping house counted a quarter, and the rain filled the silence it left, and Eleanor watched the colour go out of her stepfather's handsome, ruined face, the way it had gone out of Crispin's in the ballroom, all at once, from the jaw upward, tallow pale. You are speaking nonsense, Sir Rowland said, but the quiet had cracked, and beneath it she heard the first true note of fear. There is no trust. The girl came to me with a box of linen, and a Bible, and the Christian claims of a distant cousin, and nothing else. Everyone who ever knew her people is gone. There is no one left to say otherwise. There is Daniel Everett, said the Duke. The name landed in the room like a coin into a well. Mr. Sallow's pen slipped from his fingers and rolled off the leather case and dropped to the boards with a small dead tap, and the little grey lawyer did not stoop for it. He had gone very quiet and very careful, in the way of a man of business who has just understood that the fee is not, after all, going to be worth it. Everett is out of the country, Sir Rowland said. Everett is ruined. Everett's word is worth less than the ship that carried him off, and he took no papers a court would look at twice. He took the deed to Fen Ditton in the breast of his coat, the Duke said, and he sent me the accounts of it, 4 years of them, before he went. Rents collected on the Kent land, and never once entered to Miss Merrow's benefit. Corn money spent on Vane House coal. Timber sold off the girl's own woods to pay your son's tailor. It is all here, Sir Rowland. He crossed to the desk, and he did not open the pistol case. He opened the drawer beneath it, and drew out a flat packet of papers, tied in faded red tape, and a single stiff folded parchment, sealed with a wafer gone brown at the edges with age. The deed. And the account of what has been done with what the deed protects. I have had them these 2 months, waiting only for the one thing I could not find, which was the girl herself, safe and standing where you could not reach her before I could lay these in her hand. He turned, and he crossed the hearthrug to Eleanor, and he did not read her a word of it, and he did not keep it a moment longer than the crossing took, and he set the deed of Fen Ditton and the red-taped accounts flat into her open, waiting palm, and closed her cold fingers over them with his scarred hand, and let go. The parchment was heavier than she had thought a paper could be. It had a texture under her thumb like nothing in Sir Rowland's house, thick and slightly greasy, vellum. The dryness of it catching on the calluses fetching negus and carrying trays had put into her hands, and she turned it over once and saw her own father's name written across the fold in a clerk's round hand, Merrow. And under it, in a bolder, darker stroke that she somehow knew without being told was Daniel Everett's own. In trust for the daughter, Eleanor, against her majority. She read the one line, and the room tilted very slowly, and she did not fall. Because she had promised the Duke she would not, and because she found she wished to be standing for this. "Read the top account," the Duke said quietly. "The last entry." "Read it aloud, Miss Merrow. I think Sir Roland would do well to hear his own hand read back to him in your voice." Her fingers found the knot in the red tape and worked it loose. The topmost sheet was covered close in columns, and at the foot of the last one, in a heavy, careless script she had seen 1,000 times at the bottom of household lists and dismissal notes, ran the line she read out into the ticking dark. Michaelmas Quarter. Fen Ditton rents, £140, received in full. Her voice was very level. Applied to the Vane household, the girl to be kept in ignorance. She lowered the paper. "That is your hand, sir. I have carried enough of your letters to the post to know it in the dark. The girl to be kept in ignorance. You wrote it yourself, in your own account book, as plain as a grocer's tally, that my father's land was feeding your table, and that the one thing needful was that I should never be told." Sir Roland had risen from the chair. He stood with his gouty weight braced on the desk's edge, and the fine, ruined face had gone the grey of the ashes under the grate, and for the length of 3 heartbeats he said nothing at all. "You cannot use it," he said at last, thickly. "Everett is disgraced. The accounts are in the hand of a disgraced man, taken from my house without leave. No magistrate in England. The deed is not in Everett's hand," said the Duke. "The deed is your father's solicitor's, witnessed and sealed and lodged, and I have had a copy under a magistrate's eye these 6 weeks, Sir George Hale, of Bow Street, who was at school with me and does not care for men who spend orphans' corn on tailors' bills. The accounts are corroboration. But even without them, Sir Roland, the deed alone unmakes you. It says the land is hers. It has always said so. Every quarter you drew on it. From the first, you drew on what a court will call a fraud upon a minor, and there is no charming word at any card table in London that mends a sealed parchment." His voice never rose. "You did not come here to bargain over a duel. You came because your son was clever enough to smell a secret, and too stupid to guess it was a noose. There is your noose in the lady's hand. Now let us discuss, at last, terms." The knocker did not fall this time. The door was flung open. Crispin came through it with the rain still wet in his gold hair, and he had run from somewhere, Eleanor saw. His breath was quick, his beautiful colour high, and he took in the room in a single flashing glance, his father grey and braced against the desk. Sallow shrunk small over his shut case. Eleanor standing on the hearthrug, with a sealed parchment open in her hands, and her spine straight as a candle. His pale eyes fixed on the deed, and she watched him understand it, and she watched the understanding turn, as everything in Crispin turned, into a weapon reached for at once. "Give me that," he said, and came at her. He was fast. He had cornered her on the stairs enough times that her body knew the speed of him before her mind did, and the old cold fear leapt up in her throat. But she had the fire at her back and the deed in her fist, and she turned her shoulder and put the whole hearth between them, and it was the Duke who caught Crispin's outflung arm at the wrist, one scarred hand closing round it, and stopped him as a post stops a gate. "No," the Duke said. "It is a forgery." Crispin strained against the grip and could not move it, and the shame of that, of being held still in front of his father, went through his face like a crack through ice. "It is a foundling's fairy tale, and a disgraced steward's spite. Father, tell them, she has bewitched a fool duke into some pretty story of a stolen inheritance. There is no Kent. There was never any Kent. There is Kent," Sir Roland said. The words came out of him low and flat and finished, and they stopped his son as no grip could have. Crispin went still in the Duke's hand. He turned his gold head slowly toward his father, and Eleanor saw the thing she had glimpsed for half a second in the ballroom rise up and stay this time. The boy behind the viper, wide-eyed and under the boy something worse, the first dawning arithmetic of a man who has just seen his own ground open under his feet. "What?" Crispin whispered. "There is Kent, and there is a deed, and there are the accounts. And I wrote the accounts myself, God forgive me. Because it never once entered my head that a nobody's daughter would find a duke to read them out over my own fire at 2 a.m. Sir Roland's voice cracked and did not mend. "You clever fool. You could not let it lie. A quiet lie about a stable would have carried her off to Kent and buried the whole of it a second time, and instead you stood up in a ballroom and dared the first title in the kingdom to look. And he has looked, and now we are all of us undone. For a scene. For a laugh cheaper than crossing you." He put a shaking hand over his eyes. "Let go of him, your grace. He cannot hurt anyone now. There is nothing left to hurt them with." The Duke opened his hand. Crispin's wrist dropped. The beautiful gold-haired young man stood in the middle of the stripped library with the covers ghosting the furniture and the rain running down the black glass. And for the first time since Eleanor had known him, he had nothing at all to say. No charming word, no smiling story, no crowd to laugh. The silence was the loudest thing she had ever heard him make. "Terms," said the Duke. Into it, quietly, he drew a fresh sheet toward him across the desk and set the fallen pen back into Mr. Sallow's slack fingers, and dictated in the level, unhurried voice of a man who has planned this hour for 2 months. "You will restore the trust entire. Every quarter drawn upon it since Miss Merrow entered your house, reckoned by Mr. Sallow here against the accounts, repaid to the last farthing, by sale of vain land if it must be, for I do not much care how you find it. You will convey Fen Ditton to her clear and unencumbered, her own, tonight, in a deed Sallow will draft, and you will sign before you leave this room. And you will write, in your own hand, a full account of the ruin worked on Daniel Everett, the card table story, the whole invention of it, signed and witnessed, which I will hold, unused, in a strong box, against the single condition that neither you nor your son ever again say one charming word about Miss Merrow, or Everett, or any soul living, in any room in England, so long as you draw breath." He looked up. "Break that condition by so much as a whisper at a breakfast table, and the account goes to Sir George Hale, and to Everett's brother, and to the papers. You have spent your lives making stories with no name to hang them on. I am giving you one with your name on every line, and I am keeping it, and it will hang very quietly over you both for the rest of your days." Sir Roland lowered his hand from his eyes. "And Everett?" he said hoarsely. "You would have me confess to Everett's ruin. That will hang me as surely as the girls." "Everett comes home," the Duke said, "with his name restored by your confession, and his passage paid by you, and a public correction at as many of those 40 tables as I can reach. That is not a term, Sir Roland. That is the whole reason I have been 4 years about this. You may have your silence and your liberty and your wretched crumbling house. Everett has his country back. Those are the terms. There is the pen." Eleanor watched her stepfather look at the pen a long moment. She watched him look at Crispin, who would not meet his eyes, at Sallow, who gave the smallest grey nod of a man advising his client that the fee is not worth the noose, at the deed still open in her own steady hand. And she watched the fight go out of him, not all at once, but the way a fire goes out that has been let burn too low, a settling, a greying, a small final collapse inward. He signed. He signed the restoration, and then, when Sallow had drafted it in his quick clerk's hand, the conveyance of Fen Ditton, and then, last and slowest, his own confession of what had been done to Daniel Everett, the pen dragging across the paper as though it weighed a stone, and when it was done he set the pen down and did not look at anyone. "You will still meet me at dawn," Crispin said suddenly. They all turned. He had drawn himself up, the gold head high, the beautiful face rebuilt into its old smiling mask over a ruin everyone in the room could now see plainly through, and Eleanor understood that this, at last, was the one thing Crispin Vane could not survive, Not the loss of the money, not even the noose of the confession, but to be made small in a room, and to walk out of it small. "I have a glove against my chest," he said. "The Duke of Ashmore's own. You cannot buy that back with a deed. Whatever else is true, that is true. You challenged me before 200 people, and if you do not appear at Chalk Farm, then for all your parchments it is you who blinked, and me who stood, and I will have that much out of the night if I have nothing else." His smile trembled at one corner. "Dawn, Your Grace. I will be there. Will you?" "No," said Eleanor. She stepped down off the hearthrug, and she put herself between the two men, deed in hand, and she looked at her stepbrother across 3 feet of firelit air. "He will not be there, Crispin, and neither will you, and I will tell you why. Because a duel is a thing the world can see, and a confession locked in a strong box is a thing it cannot, and you have just spent the last hour learning which of those two your family can afford. If Ashmore meets you at dawn, the whole town asks what over, and the whole town looks, and the whole town finds Kent, and a stolen trust, and a girl's father's corn on your back. You do not want to be looked at any more than your father does. You never did." She held his pale gaze, and she did not lower her eyes, and she felt 3 years fall off her like the small bowed shape had fallen off her shoulders. "You want to stand tall in a crowd. Go home, and stand as tall as you can, and be grateful there is a crowd left that has not yet heard what I could tell it. That is the last charity you will ever have from me. And unlike your father's, it is real." Crispin looked at her for a long moment. Whatever he saw in her face, the straight spine, the steady hand, the free woman he had never learned to fight, it took the last of the smile with it. He turned without a word and went out into the rain. And after a moment Sir Roland gathered his hat from the desk, heavy and old and grey, and Mr. Sallow shut his leather case, and the two of them followed, and the front door closed below, with a sound that Eleanor felt come up through the soles of her feet and settle, at last, into stillness. The candle branch had burned down to 3 guttering stubs. The rain had gentled to a soft, steady breathing on the glass. She stood in the middle of the stripped library, with the deed to her own house in her 2 hands, and for the first time in 3 years there was no one within a mile who wished her ill, and she found she did not know what to do with the sighs of the quiet. "You did not need me," the Duke said. She turned. He stood by the cold marble mantel, where he had stood to tell her the truth, and there was something in his hard face she had not seen there before. Not the weariness, not the cold court manner, but a kind of undefended wonder, as though he had built a machine for 4 years and watched it work in a way he had never designed. In the end, he said, "I had made 100 plans for how I should save you, and every one of them broke the oath I swore you an hour ago. Every one of them was another thing done to you without your leave. And then Vane brought his pen and his noose into the room, and I opened my mouth to spend my rank on you one more time, and you stepped off that hearthrug and did it yourself. You sent him out with your own quiet word. I only held the parchments. You did the rest, standing up, where the whole room wanted you bowed." The corner of his mouth moved. "I find I have spent 4 years rehearsing a rescue for a woman who did not require one. It is a humbling discovery. I recommend it to no man of rank." The dry note in it undid her more than tenderness could have. A sound escaped her that was half a laugh and half the thing she had promised herself all night she would not do, and she pressed the deed to her breast and breathed, and mastered it. "You held the parchments 4 years, she said unsteadily. "That is not nothing, Ashmore. That is a very great deal of holding. It is what a man does when he cannot find the one thing that would let him act." He came away from the mantel and stopped a little distance from her, close enough that she caught, under the tallow and the wet wool and the fading bergamot ghost of Crispin, the plain, clean smell of him, rain and linen and no pomade at all. "May I say a thing to you, Miss Merrow, now that there is no one left in the house to overhear it and turn it into straw?" "You may say anything." I have had nothing but managed truths all night. I should like one that is only true. Then here it is, and it is the last of them. His grey eyes did not leave her face. I told you in the ballroom that I had thought of your face more often than the occasion warranted, and I called it gallantry, and it was not. I told you in this room that I stepped forward for Daniel's sake, and then that I stepped forward because I could not let the small thing stand, and both were true, and neither was the whole. The whole is this. 4 years ago I stood at a railing in the rain and watched a girl lift her face to the weather as though she had not felt it in a long while, and a voice called her in. Sharp, and she went, and I have wanted every day since to be the voice that calls her out again. Into the rain. Into the open. Somewhere no one calls her small. He drew a breath, and Eleanor heard, for the first time, that even a duke's breath could shake. I love you. I have loved a face in a garden for 4 years and a woman for 1 night, and I know how little sense it makes. And I am asking you all the same, not to be rescued, to be met. There is a difference. You taught it to me tonight. The rain breathed on the glass. Far off, the clock began to count some hour neither of them heard. Eleanor Merrow stood with the deed to Fen Ditton warm against her heart, and she looked at the great scarred stranger who had lied a garden into being, rather than speak the real one aloud, and she felt the thin bright thread she had first caught on the terrace, the first happiness in 3 years, pull taut, and hold, and become, at last, a whole strong cord she could put her weight upon. I do not want a garden you build for me, she said. I have had a house built round me by men who never asked, your good one and their wicked one both. I will not be walled into safety, not even by you, not even kindly. No, he said, I know it now, but I will walk in a real one. She stepped toward him, and she took his scarred right hand, the glove hand, the hand that had peeled the white kid off finger by finger, and set it against a viper's heart, and she turned it over in both of hers, deed and all, and held it. With you beside me, and not before me. Asking first. Every time. Those were my terms, Ashmore, and you agreed to worse, and I mean to hold you to all of them for a very long while. Her voice steadied into something she had not known she still owned. I love you too. God help us both, for I think we are each as stubborn as the other, and neither of us has the least idea how to be happy, and we shall have to learn it out loud, where the whole world can watch us fail at it. I find I do not care. I am done being quiet. He lifted her hand, deed and fingers together, and pressed his mouth to her knuckles, over the white kid, once, and it was not a claiming and not a rescue, but a small grave promise, the drawing off of every glove between them, and when he raised his head the hard grey eyes were wet, and he did not trouble to hide it, and Eleanor thought that was the bravest thing he had done all night. The rain stopped near morning. They did not go to Chalk Farm, no one did, for there was no one left to meet there, and the dawn came up soft and washed and green over a sleeping city, and the first light through the tall bare windows found them still in the library, the deed on the desk between them beside the shut and locked pistol case, talking of Daniel, of Kent, of Prudence, and Amabel, who would keep their innocence and their small dowries and never know how near the flood had come, talking the way 2 people talk who have decided to spend a very long time at it. The summer that followed dried the London gardens to dust and drove the ton to the country, and it was August, and the corn stood high and gold at Fen Ditton, before Eleanor stood again in a doorway, with her face lifted to the weather. Not the same doorway. This one was her own. The old house sat low and warm in its Kentish fold, red brick gone rose with age. The woods her father had left her rising green behind it, the woods that would never again be sold to pay a tailor, and the July heat had at last broken into a soft warm rain that came ticking down through the limes and released the whole drowned green smell of the borders. stocks and jasmine, and the deep wet earth. She stood on her own step, bareheaded, in a gown of deep summer blue that no one had told her she might not wear, and she lifted her face to the rain and let it fall on her. And this time, no voice called her in. A carrier's cart had come up the lane. The man handed down a parcel and touched his hat, and Eleanor took it in her own 2 hands. A book, by the shape of it, and a letter tied round with faded red tape she knew, and behind her in the cool hall a step she loved came unhurried across the flags. Everett writes he lands at Bristol on Thursday, the Duke of Ashmore said, coming to stand in the doorway at her shoulder, not before her, looking out with her at the rain on the corn. He says he will not know the country. I have told him the country will know him. He was quiet a moment. You are wet again. I shall be accused of it. You shall be accused of a great many things, Eleanor said, for the rest of your life. By me, out loud, in this doorway, and you will answer for every one. She leaned her damp shoulder into his arm, and felt him settle round it, warm and certain, and she turned the parcel in her calloused hands and did not open it yet, content to stand a while in the falling weather with the woods behind, and the man beside, and the whole quiet green future spread out plain before her. There is straw on my hem, she added, glancing down at where the cart had dusted it, and no ring on my finger. Whatever will they say? They will say, said her husband, taking her free hand and turning it over in his scarred one, palm up in the rain, that the Duchess of Ashmore stood in her own doorway with her face in the weather and looked entirely, scandalously happy, and that no one, this time, called her in. And no one did. The rain came down warm and green on the Kentish corn, and Eleanor Merrow lifted her face to it, and stayed. If this one warmed you by the fire, stay a while and let me know your favorite line down in the comments. And if you'd like more Regency tales like Eleanor's waiting for you each evening, do subscribe, and I'll keep the fire lit.